The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
When we see pressures building in these 40 markets, we just can't ignore it.
The FAA suddenly cutting thousands of flights just ahead of the busy holiday travel season. How the government shutdown is fueling the new restrictions.
They do what's been done since biblical times.
Honeypots exposed. A former CIA operative's new warning about America's biggest adversaries sending sex spies to steal U.S. secrets.
We must accept our nuclear potential in readiness to inflict unacceptable damage on the enemy under any circumstances.
Russia's sharp response after Trump hints at nuclear testing. The new orders from Russia amid an alleged denuclearizing plan with the U.S. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and on this Weekend Edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. First, Democrats come away with several major victories on election night. The Trump administration is ordered to fully fund SNAP benefits amid an ongoing legal battle. Plus, the Supreme Court debates over the legality of President Trump's tariffs, and a UPS plane explodes on a Louisville runway, leaving at least a dozen dead. But first, Friday was day 38 of the federal government shutdown, the longest in U.S. history, and pressure is mounting on both Democrats and Republicans to find an agreement both sides can live with. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins joins us with that story from the White House.
A deal to reopen the government remains elusive as President Trump shows no interest in working with Democrats to reopen the government. Democrats say that's exactly why they couldn't trust a compromise plan floated this week.
Well, they feel better about our country right now, other than the shutdown, obviously, which is caused by the Democrats, could be ended by the Democrats in 2 minutes.
I don't think it's a secret to anybody that the Democrats shut down the government for political reasons. There's been plenty of news coverage of the incredible pressure that their far-left base has been exerting.
Republicans need 60 votes, including a handful of Democrats, to reopen the government. Democrats have been holding out over Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire next month. They're now calling for a 1-year extension before agreeing to reopen the government.
This is a reasonable offer that reopens the government, deals with health care affordability, and begins a process of negotiating reforms to the ACA tax credits for the future.
President Trump again urging a, quote, nuclear option, where Republicans would change Senate rules to allow a shutdown vote to pass without any Democratic support.
Are you worried about it backfiring in the future on Republicans should they get rid of the filibuster?
The Democrats will do this, so if the Democrats are going to do it, I'm saying Republicans should do it before they get a chance. It's very simple.
Meanwhile, thousands of federal workers continue to go without pay. Shutdown impacts are also spilling into everyday life. The FAA ordering a reduction in flight capacity at 40 U.S. airports, resulting in hundreds of flight cancellations so far. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says the cuts are necessary to maintain safety standards.
It is not a science, it is an art that we're trying to deploy to keep people safe in the airspace.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune said even if Republicans wanted to nuke the filibuster to reopen the government, they don't have anywhere near the votes to do it. Reporting from the White House, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Continuing our coverage, the FAA's reduction in flight capacity comes as millions of people are expected to fly ahead of a busy holiday season. Last year, the Department of Transportation unveiled rules protecting passengers in the event of a delay or cancellation. If your domestic flight is canceled or delayed by more than 3 hours, you are entitled to a full refund, more than 6 hours for international flights. Also, airlines must deliver your checked luggage within 12 hours of arrival or reimburse you for any bag fees. However, airlines are not obligated to provide meal vouchers or cover lodging for stranded passengers. For more information, the DOT's website breaks down what major U.S. airlines will pay for during flight disruptions. President Trump is complicating the Republican strategy to end the shutdown. That's what several GOP senators are saying right now. Some say Democrats were close to caving on demands for health care subsidy extensions in exchange exchange for reopening. Others believe Trump's demands for nixing the filibuster are giving Democrats renewed energy. There's significant disagreement on Trump's plan.
So the president was compelling. He made a strong case for it. And I think the senators, a lot of us in the room, appreciated the case that he made.
I'm saying the filibuster has a place because we probably wouldn't. I mean, chances are we need to win elections all the time, but the truth is we probably won't always be in the majority in the Senate. And when we're not in the majority, we enjoy the filibuster.
Senator Mark Wayne Mullen there also suggested maybe a third option, a filibuster exception for shutdowns that last 10 days or more. Developing now, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth announced another U.S. military strike on an alleged drug trafficking boat in the Eastern Pacific this week. Hegseth says 2 narco-terrorists are dead. The Pentagon has carried out at least 16 known strikes like this since early September, killing more than 60 people. The latest attack comes as the United States military may soon be opening up a new front in a war on drug traffickers. U.S. troops and intelligence officers could conduct on-the-ground missions inside of Mexico against drug cartels, according to new reporting from NBC News. The mission could involve drone strikes on drug labs and cartel leaders, and the strikes would require operators on the ground to ensure accuracy and safety. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum dismissing the report.
It won't happen. We have an understanding regarding security, so that's not going to happen. We don't have any information that is going to happen, and also, we don't agree with that.
Nothing has been finalized for a potential new mission inside Mexico, but the early stages of training have reportedly already started. Israel launched a wave of airstrikes into southern Lebanon this week, targeting Hezbollah infrastructure. The bombardment comes hours after Hezbollah urged the Lebanese government against negotiating with Israel. It's an escalation in the near daily Israeli strikes on Lebanon. The Trump administration is planning a U.S. military presence at an air base in Syria's capital, according to Reuters. The U.S. is using the base to monitor and support a potential security agreement between Syria and Israel. The presence would be a strategic shift, looking to rebuild relations with the country after the rule of the Assad family ended last year. President Trump is set to meet with the president of Syria at the White House on Monday. Sex spies from China and Russia are now emerging all across the U.S. and targeting a different group of people to try and steal the country's technology and state secrets. A former CIA operative saying he's seen firsthand how these spies use honeypot tactics to compromise their targets. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, has more.
Tech industry leaders in Silicon Valley are now speaking out, saying they've recently been approached by would-be honeypots or spies as part of a, quote, sex warfare operation by China and Russia, all aimed at stealing American technology secrets. One of the many men recently targeted, James Mulvenin, works at Premier Consulting, which provides risk assessments for American companies investing in China. Mulvenin telling the Times of London, quote, "I'm getting an enormous number of very sophisticated LinkedIn requests from the same type of attractive young Chinese women. It really seems to have ramped up recently." A former CIA operative, J. Michael Waller, says he's seen firsthand how China and Russia are using honeypot tactics to steal U.S. secrets and even compromise politicians, pointing to an encounter he had years ago at a work event in Poland after a woman approached him saying she worked for the Polish government.
She kindly invited herself up to my room. And then I looked at her and I said, no 25-year-old woman is going to want to be hanging around me for that kind of thing. You're a spy.
Waller says he then alerted the authorities, who threw her out of the country. But what he encountered is a form of psychological warfare, the spies messing with people's heads.
They do the pickup part, the making them feel important part, the playing to their ego part. Who's the lonely geek behind the computer who doesn't have a life? Who's the lonely bureaucrat who doesn't have a life?
Now, one notable honeypot case involves Democratic California Representative Eric Swalwell, who was targeted by a suspected Chinese intelligence operative named Christine Fang. Swalwell cut off contact with her in 2015 after the FBI alerted him about its concerns, but the incident led to widespread controversy, specifically about his position on the House Intelligence Committee.
This is how in-depth the Chinese are at spying on America, of wanting to know, of stealing our secrets. And the Intel Committee is different than any other committee. This is where America's secrets are kept. This is where the individuals are able to know things that other members are not.
Now, following an investigation, Swalwell was cleared of any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the House Committee on Homeland Security warns the Chinese Communist Party has carried out over 60 espionage operations inside the U.S. just over the past 4 years. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Coming up next, the investigation into the Louisville tragedy slowly unraveling. What we are learning about the victims is crucial clues are being pulled from the wreckage. Plus, a missing girl in California, the new evidence in her disappearance as investigators expand their search efforts. Central Asian leaders visit the White House as President Trump looks to deepen economic and security ties. The summit comes as Trump intensifies nuclear weapons testing to gain influence over China and Russia and looks for international support. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins reports.
International discussions around testing nuclear weapons sharply escalating. On Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin ordering his government to prepare plans for nuclear weapons testing.
I instruct the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, Special Services, and relevant civilian agencies to do everything possible to gather additional information on this matter.
Putin's request follows comments from President Trump, who said the United States is ready to resume its own nuclear testing.
Why do we need to test our nuclear weapons?
Well, because you have to see how they work.
In a meeting Wednesday with his Security Council, Putin said Russia has adhered to the international treaty prohibiting nuclear weapons tests, but warned if the U.S. resumed such testing, Russia would be under obligation to take reciprocal measures. Putin's defense minister, meanwhile, sending forces and assets to a test site in northern Russia.
We must accept our nuclear potential in readiness to inflict unacceptable damage on the enemy under any circumstances.
Trump telling 60 Minutes Russia and China are already testing.
We're the only country that doesn't test. Russia's testing nuclear weapons.
My understanding
and China's testing them too. You just don't know about it.
The last time the U.S. detonated a nuclear device as part of a test was in 1992. Russia's last known nuclear explosive test was in 1990 and China's in 1996. Days after Putin said Russia tested a nuclear-powered underwater drone, Russia displayed a new submarine last weekend designed to carry nuclear torpedoes. And early Wednesday, the U.S. successfully launched an unarmed test of the Minuteman III missile, part of the U.S. deterrent system meant to be launched only in response to a nuclear attack. Amid talk of resuming nuclear weapons tests, President Trump says he's spoken with Putin and China's President Xi about denuclearization. Trump says all three leaders are working on a plan. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Happening now, 9-year-old Melody Buzzard from California has been missing for nearly a month after her mother returned from a road trip without her. Police released these photos of Buzzard and her mom wearing wigs when they picked up a rental car. And at some point, the California license plate on the car was changed to a New York plate and then changed back. Our true crime team, Criminally Obsessed, spoke with the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office about the investigation.
We initially knew that this trip went from California to Nebraska down into Kansas and then before it returned back to Lompoc. And so we were searching for Melody anywhere along that route.
And the FBI tried to get surveillance footage from several Utah businesses, but they were too late. The small shops only have enough storage to keep 2 weeks worth of video. In Kentucky, investigators have started collecting parts from the UPS cargo plane that crashed and killed multiple people this week in Louisville. On Thursday, a Teamster union held a candlelight vigil to honor the lives lost in the devastating crash. During the vigil, the mayor of Louisville announcing a 13th victim has died. Several people are still unaccounted for, and recovery crews are still searching for the remains. The NTSB will release its preliminary report within 30 days. The man who threw a sandwich at a federal agent in Washington, D.C. has been found not guilty of assault. Thursday, a jury found Sean Charles Dunn not guilty of assaulting an officer when he threw a hoagie at an agent. The incident happened back in August during President Trump's law enforcement surge in the nation's capital. Dunn's attorneys called his actions a harmless gesture during an act of protest. A Virginia jury has awarded $10 million to a former first-grade teacher shot by a 6-year-old student. Abby Zwerner sued her former assistant principal, Ebony Parker, accusing her of ignoring warnings the child had a gun. Zwerner was shot in January 2023 at an elementary school in Newport News. Parker faces a separate criminal trial for felony child neglect. Zwerner was originally seeking $40 million. About 24 attorneys general are suing the education department over a new rule on a student loan forgiveness program for public servants. The rule allows for employers to be disqualified for engaging in activities with a, quote, substantial illegal purpose, defined as supporting terrorism and aiding and abetting illegal immigration. An education official tells Axios the reform is to stop taxpayer dollars from subsidizing these organizations. California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill to fast-track research on psychedelic treatments for mental health conditions, particularly PTSD. This comes as a new frontier is opening up in mental health treatment for veterans, and it's one that, until recently, was completely off limits. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. So you've been looking into the psychedelic-assisted therapy using drugs like MDMA and psilocybin. It used to be pretty rare, as we mentioned, kind of a new frontier. What's changed?
Definitely. So what's changed is really the amount of data that's come out about all of this. So for years, veterans who didn't respond to standard PTSD treatments like exposure therapy or antidepressants have been left without options. So now new research out of the Veterans Health Administration that I found is showing that certain psychedelic compounds, when used in therapy settings, could be a total game changer for a lot of these people who have been struggling for years.
Let's start with MDMA. What kind of results did participants experience in this trial?
So MDMA, which is known as ecstasy, this trial found it reduced fear and boosted empathy, also helped patients revisit trauma safely. In 2 phase 3 clinical trials, participants who received MDMA-assisted therapy had a dramatic reduction in PTSD symptoms compared to the ones who were on the placebo.
What about psilocybin, the psychedelic in mushrooms?
Yeah, so studies show it can create kind of a neural flexibility and reduce the brain's fear response, which is essential for processing trauma. So they saw, great progress with that as well for the people who participated in this.
All right, Emma, thank you so much. A little later on, Emma will be back to dig deeper into the science and the results veterans are getting with these treatments. Coming up next, where a population boom has put a strain on the housing market and how builders are trying to keep up with the demand for affordable homes. Plus, the heartwarming homecoming for a World War II veteran. We'll show you where he was laid to rest with full military honors. We're back in 90 seconds. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start with a housing shortage in Utah.
Adding new homes, but not enough in an already tough market for buyers. Both of them have great jobs here.
Janae Bailey has 2 sons in their 20s.
They are having some difficulty finding a house that's affordable, too.
I have a nephew who's trying to buy a house.
How's that going?
It doesn't go very well. Things are expensive.
And now this report from public policy group Envision Utah and the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. It says Utah will need 840,000 new homes over the next 30 years. We're on track now, it says, for just over 600,000.
More than 300,000 homes are going to have to be built in currently undeveloped vacant land. That's the equivalent of about 11 daybreaks a decade over the next 30 years.
New home construction will need to be supercharged on raw land, in cities, and near mass transit.
I'm so afraid to just bring them to school.
Another day, another disturbing fight at Woonsocket High School.
Because I'm doing my best to protect my kids, and it's hard. It's hard. It's hard.
Joanna Rivera says her freshman daughter has been jumped twice by the same group of girls since the start of the school year. First in September. Run, run, run! And again today. This time it was her daughter who was also arrested and suspended. Police say 3 girls ages 14, 14, and 16 were arrested Wednesday for disorderly conduct. It's part of a growing pattern. Since the start of the school year, more than 20 students have been charged or suspended due to fighting, according to the school committee. In September, Superintendent Patrick McGee said fights have been rising across all grade levels over the past 5 years, fueled by social media, gangs, and sometimes even parents.
I never met my uncle, but I'm feeling like I'm getting to know him through all of the preparation for this.
Norma Davis attended today's long-awaited homecoming of her uncle, Staff Sergeant John Pagluso, who went off to fight with the boys in World War II.
I've heard about him all my life from my mother and my aunts.
Sergeant Pagluso lost his life during a bombing mission over Papua New Guinea, October 5th, 1942. His remains were identified 83 years later.
The remains were identified on his mother's birthday, my grandmother's birthday, which I thought was pretty amazing. And then I got the call on my birthday.
Sergeant Pagluso arriving home with his family, fellow veterans, first responders, and the New York National Guard Military Forces Honor Guard in waiting. He will be laid to rest with full military honors.
He'll be buried next to my grandmother and grandfather.
Coming up next here, hundreds of thousands of Jeeps recalled, the dangerous risk taking some of the nation's most popular SUVs off the road, and favored nation pricing, the major weight loss drug deal the president just put into motion. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now, the White House announced a deal that would lower the cost of weight loss drugs Wegovy and Zepbound. President Trump also says Medicare and Medicaid will cover the cost of the drugs. Former Republican Vice President Dick Cheney, who served alongside President George W. Bush, died at the age of 84. According to a statement from his family, Cheney died Monday night while surrounded by his family members. And former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has announced she will not seek re-election for another term in Congress. It would end her nearly 4 decades in Washington. Those stories and more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Peloton is recalling every unit it ever sold of its original Bike Plus over a seat post issue. The Consumer Product Safety Commission says Peloton received reports that the seat post broke and fell off the equipment. 2 people were injured. You're urged to stop using the bikes and contact Peloton for a free seat post you can install at home. Moonlight Companies is recalling several lots of its white and yellow peaches because of a potential for listeria contamination. The California-grown peaches were sold at retail stores nationwide between September 16th and October 29th. JFE Franchising is also recalling a limited number of their peach salsa products because it used peaches from Moonlight Companies. As of now, there are no reports of any injuries. Starbucks union members have voted to strike in at least 25 cities next week unless it finalizes a contract agreement. The strike would begin on November 13th, also known as Starbucks' Red Cup Day, one of the company's busiest days of the year. The union has proposed an immediate 65% pay increase and a 77% increase over 3 years, with additional payments for weekends and days when Starbucks runs promotion. Jeep now recalling more than 375,000 plug-in hybrid SUVs due to a potential fire risk due to battery failure. The recall covers certain model year 2020 to 2025 Jeep Wrangler 4XEs and 2022 to 26 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4XEs. There's been 19 reports of fires with 1 injury. Stellantis says owners should not recharge the batteries or park near structures and other vehicles until a fix is available. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
Look at energy. We're going to have $2 gasoline. I did that. That brings everything else down. Groceries are way down other than beef.
Trump painting a rosy picture of the economy. The new data that reveals the state of America.
If you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans.
The Republican Party reacting to Tuesday's election results. The changes they say are needed before next year's midterms. And artificial intelligence putting millions of jobs on the chopping block. the AI-proof industries Americans are now rushing towards. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, thank you for being here. I'm Dee Gatton, and we are getting an updated look at the state of the labor market, with newly released private data showing a sharp spike in job losses. This as the economy remains Americans' top concern. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar has a closer look at the numbers.
There are flashing red warning signs for the job market, as last month was the worst October for layoffs in 22 years. According to new data from the outplacement firm Challenger Gray & Christmas, in October, U.S. employers announced more than 153,000 job cuts. That's the highest figure for the month since 2003 and more than 2.5 times the cuts from the month prior. Why do companies say they're cutting jobs? Well, they cite general cost cutting and AI. But Challenger says the top reason is what they call the DOGE impact. DOGE meaning President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, tasked with slashing government jobs and spending. With that comes fewer jobs for contractors and lost funding for private and nonprofit entities.
The stock market's hitting record highs.
President Trump insists he's ushering a golden age for the economy.
We've done so much. Energy is way down. Look at energy. We're going to have $2 gasoline. I did that. That brings everything else down. Groceries are way down other than beef.
According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the overall consumer inflation rate is actually back to the same level it was when Trump took office, 3%. On energy, average gas prices have remained steady, slightly over $3 a gallon, but energy and gas utility bills have soared. After sweeping Democratic victories in Tuesday's election, the president says Republicans are not communicating with voters.
It's no good if we do a great job and you don't talk about it. And I don't think they talk about it enough. They have this new word called affordability, and they don't talk about it enough.
Democrats, especially after Tuesday, working to assert themselves as the party with solutions.
Life has gotten more expensive under Donald Trump and Republican policies. This is from a group of people led by Donald Trump who promised that costs were going to go down on day one.
Looking ahead to how consumers will navigate these economic conditions, on Thursday, the National Retail Federation announced its holiday forecast, and they predict spending will be roughly 4% higher than last year, but seasonal hiring is expected to be the lowest in 15 years. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Adobe predicts record online holiday shopping this year. According to Adobe, from now until December 31st, sales are expected to hit $253 billion. That's 5% growth compared to last year. Cyber Week is expected to drive overall spending with nearly $44 billion, up 6% from last year. Adobe predicts Cyber Monday will remain the most dominant of the shopping season. The Trump administration's argument to justify its sweeping tariffs against most global trading partners is being met with skepticism at the Supreme Court. Justices heard arguments Wednesday on the case, the most significant economic issue before the court in years. The White House is relying on an emergency powers law to enact the tariffs. President Trump argues the economy is in an emergency right now and needs that revenue. But businesses in a dozen states argue the on and off tariffs have driven up costs to an unsustainable level. Conservative justices appear skeptical Trump has the authority to impose them.
Can you point to any other place in the code or any other time in history where that phrase, together, regulate importation, has been used to confer tariff-imposing authority?
Lower courts have found the president does not have the power to set tariffs, but say they can stay in place for now. A decision on the case may take weeks or months. As the Supreme Court considers whether President Trump has the right to impose tariffs on countries around the world, the president is responding to arguments that those tariffs are a tax on Americans.
Look, I'm ending war because of these tariffs. Americans would have to fight in some of these wars. They're gaining in national security. They're gaining in economics. They're gaining in so many different ways. And they're gaining in self-respect for our own country.
Chief Justice John Roberts called the tariffs taxes during arguments, saying imposing taxes has always been a function of Congress. Several businesses and states are suing, arguing the tariffs are illegal along that same line of thinking. Would-be first-time home buyers appear to be getting priced out of the housing market. The National Association of Realtors reports that the share of first-time home buyers has dropped to a record low of 21%. First-time buyers typically made up of about 40% of home purchases prior to 2008. The typical age for first-time buyers hit a record of 40 years old. The median age of all home buyers was 59 years old. The deployment of National Guard troops in the nation's capital will last through February. A recent formal order extends deployment through February 28th. It's in response to the president's August emergency declaration and direction from the Secretary of War. The original order expired in September. Roughly 2,000 troops from D.C. and 8 other states remain, though most plan to withdraw later this month. Very different brands of Democratic politics had big election victories Tuesday night. As the National News Desk Matt Gelka reports, the question now is, which path does the party take?
The next mayor of New York City, Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani, vowed to deliver on left-wing affordability promises like raising taxes on the wealthy to pay for free transportation, rent stabilization, and cheap childcare in the city.
I am a Democratic Socialist. And most damning of all, I refuse to apologize for any of this.
Mamdani's unapologetic socialist views have already made him a target of President Trump. The president has repeatedly threatened to defund New York City if Mamdani won.
The decision facing all Americans could not be more clear. We have a choice between communism and common sense.
Republicans are eager to make Mamdani and socialism the new Democratic brand, and they're already launching ads.
Zohran Mamdani is without a doubt the biggest win for socialism in the history of the country, and it is the biggest loss for the American people.
Your city could be next. Stop socialism, stop Democrats.
In New Jersey and Virginia, two very different Democrats than Mamdani convincingly won governorships. Moderates Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey and Abigail Spanberger in Virginia also ran on cost of living issues while staying closer to the center. The affordability message seems to be the new way for Democrats, but the party might have a problem picking between Democratic socialist positions or the views of the establishment heading into the 2026 midterms.
No great secret. Of course there's an establishment, and of course there's a division within the Democratic Party.
The issue that he has stressed is being stressed by Democrats across the country, from one end of America to the other, the high costs that the Trump administration is imposing on us.
When New Yorkers were asked in exit polling if they considered themselves Democratic Socialists, 69% said no, including almost 40% who voted for Mamdani. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Continuing our election coverage, we are looking at the fallout from Tuesday's results. As Christine Frizzell reports, sweeping victories by Democrats are leading some Republicans to call for drastic changes.
It was the first time in a long time Democrats have had a lot to celebrate. Not just winning elections, but winning by a landslide. Abigail Spanberger by 15 points in Virginia and Mikey Sherrill by 13 points in New Jersey, plus the overwhelming passage of a redistricting ballot measure in California. Some Republicans downplaying what the victories might mean.
What happened last night was blue states and blue cities voted blue, and no one should read too much into last night's election results.
President Trump, though, with a slightly different take.
I don't think it was good for Republicans. I think if you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans.
Pollster Scott Rasmussen seems to agree.
When we first polled on this in the earliest days of the shutdown, hardly anybody noticed anything was going on. As of yesterday, 44% of voters nationwide say they have been impacted. Voters hate shutdowns and they blame the party in power.
President Trump is once again calling on Senate Republicans to end the filibuster rule, which requires 60 votes and not just a simple majority to pass legislation.
If you don't terminate the filibuster, you'll be in bad shape. We won't pass any legislation. There'll be no legislation passed for 3.25. We have 3.25 years, so that's a long time.
But those short-term gains could spell long-term pain for Republicans if Democrats retake the chamber and use the new rules to pass their priorities, which some fear could expand abortion rights and take aim at Second Amendment rights, among other agenda items. One reason why many Republicans still oppose the so-called nuclear option.
Everybody knows
follows our government in this process that in the Senate, it takes a supermajority. It takes 60 votes to do virtually anything.
Exit polling found economic issues were the most important issues for voters. Some Republicans say if they focus more on bringing down costs, they could fare much better in next year's midterm elections. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
And looking ahead to a future election, the Democratic Party appears to have an advantage heading towards next year's midterms. According to a CNN poll conducted by SSRS, voters who lean left say they are either extremely or very motivated to enter the booth. 47% of registered voters say they would pick a Democrat if the election were held today. That's 5 percentage points more than those who would vote for a Republican. As for the state of the country, 68% say it's in bad shape. 61% of those polled say the Trump administration has made the U.S. economy worse overall.
New approaches to PTSD treatment are becoming more mainstream as California Governor Gavin Newsom signs a bill to accelerate research and the FDA considers legalizing certain psychedelic substances for mental health treatments. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. So recent studies have shown some of these psychedelics have a big impact as PTSD treatments, specifically for veterans. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So this study that I found in Nature Mental Health, it found that a single supervised dose of ibogaine combined with magnesium to protect the heart led to dramatic improvements in PTSD, depression, and anxiety. So 30 special ops vets saw an 88% drop in PTSD symptoms, 87% in depression, and 81% in anxiety, all within just a month. Their disability scores improved from mild to moderate to no disability, and there were also no serious side effects, only headaches and nausea, which is pretty unbelievable.
So this was outside the U.S.?
Yes, yeah, this was done in Mexico. Ibocaine's still a Schedule I drug here, so all of that study was done at a clinic down in Mexico, but Texas also just approved a $50 million initiative to fund ibogaine clinical trials, which is one of the largest public investments we've seen in psychedelic research ever. The lead author, Dr. Nolan Williams, called it a possible, neuro rehab drug that could repair damaged brain networks, not just mask the symptoms, which is what they usually do.
Right. It is fascinating, and we know this will continue to be studied. Emma, thank you so much. And for more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. Coming up, CTE scares in youth football has parents and medical experts speaking out. The new safety standards coming to the gridiron aimed at keeping your child safe. The deadly brain disease CTE can begin in children who suffer head injuries and concussions while playing youth football. And many helmets they wear can actually make them more vulnerable to this danger. Spotlight on America's Dwayne Pullman takes us inside the country's leading helmet lab to meet the man who helped pass America's first youth helmet standards.
3 at Virginia Tech, 2 football helmets, 1 are battered by mechanical rams and dropped in hard landings.
We've done thousands and thousands of head impacts.
This is the helmet lab.
We built this whole system.
Steve Rosen, who has a PhD in biomedical engineering, is the director.
Just do it.
Here, Rosen and his team reproduce real-life blows on the field.
We're simulating a helmet-to-helmet impact
to gather data and rate the helmets for how well they perform in protecting players from violent blows and concussions. For years, we've documented the dangers of repeated concussive blows to the head that can lead to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a brain disease that has claimed countless lives, including hundreds of NFL players who had CTE when they died. At the Helmet Lab, repeated impacts allow Rosen and his team to rate the helmets in a 5-star safety system.
So the ultimate is a 5-star.
Right.
And competition for that coveted 5-star status has been a game changer, producing much safer helmets that are now protecting players across America.
Better now than ever.
Beginning in 2011, Rosen turned his attention to youth football, noting unique and disturbing dangers faced by pre-high school players who take the field. At the lab, Rosen showed me how sensors, called accelerometers, inside youth football helmets gathered real-time data.
You're getting boom,
Right.
boom.
We'd measure skull acceleration.
It led to a startling conclusion. In this study of youth concussion risks that Dr. Rosen co-authored and published in 2019, it states children are more vulnerable to brain injury than adults because they have differences in tolerance to concussion.
A college football player, typical concussion at the time was around 100 Gs. What we were seeing in the youth football players was about 60 Gs. So it's 40% less.
Just as surprising, Rosen says, is another vulnerability of children caused by their head-to-body ratio.
They have a bigger head and weaker neck.
That weakness, Rosen says, causes young players to be susceptible to head injuries, not just from helmet-to-helmet hits, but from impacts with the turf.
So your body hits the ground, and then your head follows through.
And a heavy helmet that protects older players, Rosen and his team discovered, actually contributes to concussions by accelerating the forces in those ground impacts.
You've got a bobblehead doll effect.
Dr. Robert Cantu, a renowned neurosurgeon, is one of the country's leading experts on sports injuries and co-founder of the CTE Center in Boston with Dr. Ann McKee. He's also the vice president of the National Operating Committee on Standards for Athletic Equipment, or NOCSE, which for the first time this year passed standards for youth helmets, including a critical weight limit. Right now, youth helmets can weigh up to 4.5 pounds, but beginning in 2027, under the new standards, youth helmets can weigh no more than 3.5 pounds. While Dr. Cantu makes it clear the new standards won't eliminate all dangers on the gridiron, he believes these lighter helmets will make the game safer for young players.
I'm confident that the helmet and the specifications for the youth football helmet that NOCSE's put forward will decrease the risk for our youth from taking hits to the head.
Back at Virginia Tech's Helmet Lab, Rosen and his team are proud of their pivotal role in detecting dangers and providing better protections for children who play the game.
These helmets are doing a better job at reducing the forces across every head impact that you're seeing.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Dwayne Pullman.
The new youth standards, which include the lighter helmets, are scheduled to go into effect in September 2027. New details: Epic Games, the maker of the popular game Fortnite, is settling a 5-year legal fight with Google. This comes after Epic had accused Google of running its app store as an illegal monopoly. Both companies announced that they've reached a comprehensive settlement, which reportedly calls for fee caps on how much Google can collect on transactions. Epic Games partially won a similar lawsuit against Apple in 2020. More warning signs for white-collar workers in America. Jobs once seen as safe are now on the chopping block as big companies like Amazon, Rivian, and General Motors are eliminating jobs. A new survey from Goldman Sachs paints a dire picture. Fortune, citing 11% of companies are actively linking layoffs to AI, while 31% of tech, media, and communications companies were cutting jobs because of AI.
It's a wake-up call all the way around for everyone. No one is safe because with these AI tools, assistants, you can get so much more done in seconds for less.
Now many Americans are looking for AI-proof jobs. Trade jobs are attracting new attention, and flight training is soaring during a global shortage. Coming up, the unique way a retired couple in Rhode Island is helping feed people in their community. Plus, the new treatment for a rare disease that's giving hope to a family in South Carolina. We'll be right back. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America, and we start in South Carolina, where doctors are working on a treatment for a rare disease.
Thymidine kinase 2 deficiency, or 2K2D, is a rare, progressive, and life-threatening disorder that causes severe muscle weakness. 6-year-old Jeremiah was diagnosed when he was just 8 months old. The disease makes it difficult for him to walk, eat, and even breathe on his own. But this week, for the first time, there's new hope. On Monday, a biopharmaceutical company announced FDA approval of KYUU, a powdered medication designed to treat both adults and children who develop symptoms before the age of 12.
I honestly just cried. It was one of those moments where I didn't quite have the words.
Within the last few years, the Boy Scouts have built us a knowledge and entertainment shack for books and CDs and DVDs. And we also now have this wellness shack for health and beauty aids, that kind of stuff.
All of this is now a part of the Manville Share Shack.
Some days there might not be much, other days we've had a big donation and there's a lot.
It's a hub to help the community and beyond with basics like food and hygiene products.
A lot of the people that come here have a very difficult time making ends meet.
The stands are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No paperwork, no questions asked.
Oh, people are really grateful. Really very grateful.
The South Carolina Shrimpers Association sued more than 40 restaurants this summer, accusing them of selling imported shrimp as local. A study found nearly 90% of tested restaurants were mislabeling. But Judge Richard Gergel threw out the case, saying the association didn't have the standing to sue. Shrimpers said they knew this was possible, but it still hurts.
We're disappointed in the outcome of the case, but what it's really gone to show is that there's a reason, that there's a distinct difference and why the consumer deserves the right to know the difference between imported and domestic wild-caught shrimp.
The Shrimpers Association hasn't announced any immediate plan to appeal, but say this isn't the end of the Shrimpgate saga.
So to come, it may spell the end for traditional television. The new study breaking down the state of modern tech as a new generation changes the media landscape. Traditional TV now fading into the background. 43% of Gen Z say they prefer social media platforms and YouTube over television and paid streaming. That's according to Activate Consulting's Technology and Media Outlook 2026. Findings show streaming revenues are expected to rise by nearly 20% annually, but TV revenues are projected to fall by almost 5%. Researchers say viewers spend more than 13 hours per day on social media. Amid a penny shortage, U.S. businesses struggle with cash transactions and little guidance from the federal government. Earlier this year, President Trump announced the U.S. Mint would stop producing pennies to save costs. Banks, unable to order a new supply, have started rationing the coin. Retailers are either trying to scrounge up pennies from customers or are waiting for updates to the point of sale system. Some retailers are also now rounding cash transactions. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, You can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week. We'll see you on Monday.